In your career, how much? Because like Israel, diplomatically, we look at all these different countries, whether it be Israel, Britain, countries that are like friends diplomatically. One thing I've learned talking to a lot of you guys who were in espionage, a lot of times there's no such thing as a friend.
There is no such thing as a friend.
Yeah, in the espionage world. Nonetheless, there's the imagery to make it appear that way sometimes. That's why we have things like the Five Eyes where, they claim to share all information. They probably don't. But with Israel, did you do work with them? Did you have overlap with them during your career? And if so, what was the nature of that you can talk about?
Yeah, so the short answer, I mean, it's classified, it's sensitive. The United States the CIA works closely with Mossad on a number of different priorities, not every priority, right? So during the global war on terror and all of the years of that war, which were some of my core years at CIA, Mossad and CIA were hip and hip on counterterrorism issues. The United States and Mossad were hip and hip on counter-nuclear proliferation issues, right? So issues of preventing the spread of nuclear weapons. Yeah. But on topics like the rise of China, now all of a sudden there's secrets between Mossad and the United States. And you got to keep in mind too that there's a long history of Israel spying against the United States by creating moles inside the U.S. government.
Yeah, Jonathan Pollard.
Exactly. So even though Israel is an ally and a friend, they are still actively cultivating and creating penetrations of our government, our CIA, our intelligence infrastructure, our military infrastructure.
Do we do that to them?
We do that to everybody. That's why there's no friends.
Right.
No, everybody does it to us. We do it to everybody else. Right. Remember when Obama was caught spying on Angela Merkel in 2009, I think it was?
That was Obama?
That was under the Obama administration.
It was?
Mm-hmm. I may have started under the Bush administration before him. I think it was Bush before him, wasn't it?
Yeah, can we pull that up? That's clicking in my head. But yeah, point taken.
Yeah, so we don't have, there are no friends. Everybody spies on everybody else. In the intelligence world, that's just carte blanche. So that's an answer to your question. Like, did we work with Israel? Yes. The specifics, I can't disclose. Those are something that, those missions, those specific avenues, the way that we liaise, all of that stuff is still very classified. What I will also say, though, is that when you work with Mossad, they are really good at what they do. Not only in terms of, bang, bang, blow it up, but also in terms of sitting across the table from you and you feel like you're with a friend. Like they are very, very good.
Come on, break bread with me.
Very, very good at human intelligence collection.
Yeah. I mean, those books I recommend, Gideon Spies and Rise and Go First. Yeah. You really see it in that. All right, yeah, we just, Alessi pulled this up. So Merkel calls Obama about U.S. spying on her phone. No, we would never. We would never do that.
Germany is a friend and a democracy.
I've always wondered, like you've said in the past, that, there's some countries where the intelligence is so good and you'd never expect it. And you're like, ooh, was unfamiliar with your game. And then there's other countries where you're like, ooh, not good. And I always have wondered if Germany's one of them.
The BND is the German External Service, right?
Are they one of them?
It's really fun. They're very good at technological collection.
Apparently not.
No, that's how they caught it.
Oh, but they didn't stop it. That's the problem.
Well, you can't. I mean, catching it and stopping it are two different things.
Okay.
Finding out that you're listening in on my phone doesn't necessarily mean I have the technology to block the technology that you're using to spy on my phone.
Okay.
Right? But it's still the first step. Otherwise, not even knowing that you're spying on my phone means I don't even have the awareness that you're spying on me at all. So there's always two steps to an intel operation. There's identifying it, and then there's countering it. Either way, the BND is really funny because inside Germany, Germans hate their intelligence service because of the long history all the way back to like pre-World War II, where the internal German services all spied on their own people, right? So BND has to carry all of that baggage, and culturally, the people don't like the BND. Culturally, they think the BND is corrupt. They think that the BND is incompetent. They think the BND is their deep state, right? So the Germans do not like their own intelligence service, which isn't all that different from what happens here in the United States, except there's a solid group of people here in the US who also recognize and appreciate CIA. There really isn't a solid group of people inside Germany who like the BND. But the BND is very, very good at technical collection because Germany is a wealthy European country. They're one of the two top economic earners in Europe. And they put almost all of their money into technical collection, technical intelligence capabilities inside of Germany to protect German interests. The other wealthy country is France. France is the DGSE, that's their intelligence service, also very well funded, also very capable, but the focus of the two is different. Germany focuses heavily on technical collection. DGSE focuses on offensive and defensive industrial and economic espionage more than just technical collection. But they're both very well funded because a huge portion of their GDP gets reinvested into intelligence. That's why in NATO, the German chancellor, I think it was last year in 2023, the German chancellor said, we're going to take money away from our intelligence service and invest it into our military base so that Germany can become the new military leader of Europe, of NATO, so that we're not so dependent on the United States. Which is funny to think that Germany is going to invest in growing its military to become the new military power of NATO. Because the last time Germany had a giant military power, didn't turn out so good for, the North Atlantic.
No, it didn't. That's interesting that attitude you point to is this psychological thing that's existed across generations in their society. And it's, the easiest thing to break is trust.
Yeah.
And the hardest thing to build is trust.
Absolutely.
Right? So you do one thing and it's gone. And I think about this a lot here now because you and I have had plenty of conversations before. We don't need to go through and redo some of those. But yeah, there's things that are different intelligence agencies, because there's a bunch of them, that they do that I think are a huge problem. There is influence where I think they've gone way too far. We're talking about, constitutional issues and stuff like that. Putting that aside for a second though, I understand the blowback that many people feel like I do towards those things, and then the fact that many of those people then respond how, and I'm talking about Americans right now, and I'm talking online, right? They respond by saying, get rid of these agencies and stuff. And I look at them, and like everything else, I'm like, all right, can we please live right here? Like you're going here, bad idea. Here's a very bad idea too. I agree with that. We don't want to trample on rights. That's why you and I have had some disagreements on like Edward Snowden, who I think was in a very bad position. But, he saw a lot of rights being trampled on. How do we live here? Because if you do, I don't know, get rid of CIA. See, I'm a realist. I feel like we'd last 2 days, maybe 3, right? And shit would just hit the fan. And you can't hold yourself to a way higher bar, unfortunately, than all these other countries do. But how do we do that in a way where we don't take it too far and say, you know what, we know the Constitution's important, but your safety is more important, to the point that in the future you live in a society where they completely run everything, and the worst of those people, meaning not many of the good people that you work with, which I believe you did work with, but the worst of those people can take advantage of those powers and turn America on its head.
We started going wrong in the 1970s when we made this transition to populist and career politicians. From prior to that, like, people would come out of the military and have a fantastic military career and then become a senator or congressman, and they would have a second career in politics. So they would have a 20-year career in the military, and then they would become a congressperson for 5 or 6 terms, and then they would rotate to another congressperson, right? Like, they were public servants. Well, then we started having these freshman congresspeople and freshman senators who were young and would spend 25 years, 30 years in politics.
Yep.
Our country is built, to your exact point, right? Our country is built on the idea of representative democracy, like democratic principles, which means you're supposed to focus on being a podcaster. That's what you're supposed to focus on. You're supposed to focus on good content, creative conversations, pushing the envelope, getting it published in high quality, video and high quality audio. That's what you're supposed to do. And then periodically, you're supposed to vote on somebody to represent your constituency interests at a higher level of politics. You're not supposed to meddle in politics. You're supposed to be responsible and ethical in the way that you choose a representative who will represent you for the next 2 years in Congress, and the person who will represent you for the next 6 years in the Senate. And you're supposed to do that for your state and for your county and for your federal government, right? For your national level. That's what you're supposed to do, along with being a podcaster. We gave up our civic duty to find the right representatives from the 70s on. We started not doing our civic duty to understand who we were voting for. We started voting for whoever was advertised to us. We started voting for whoever was espousing the 2 or 3 priorities that we cared most about. Right. And then as older people voted more and younger people voted less, then you started having this dichotomy of the only policies that people were really paying attention to or talking about or trying to move the needle on were the 2 or 3 policies that were most impactful to the older generations. That's why you always see healthcare as a debated topic. That's why you always see Medicare and Medicaid as a debated topic. That's why you always see, immigration as a debated topic, because that's what older generations care about. Younger generations care about something completely different. So as like generation after generation goes by, you have these entrenched politicians who do not represent the constituencies that they're supposed to be representing, which results in the constituency members like you and me thinking and talking more about politics when we don't have any power over politics except to vote for who could change the future of politics. So to your point, how do we live here? Like, how do we not go to the place where we disband CIA, but also not go to the place where CIA has no oversight at all?
Yeah.
Right? How do we stay in the middle? We have to lean into the democratic process that we built here in our country and make sure that we participate in local elections, participate in senatorial, gubernatorial, and congressional races, get people who represent our interests into office, because once those people are in office, they become the oversight committee for CIA. They are dedicated to actually representing the constituency that voted them into office, because they don't care about making the party happy. They care about making their constituency happy, because they know that their head is on the chopping block as soon as 2 years or 6 years is up.
I think this is great. I think you're missing 2 words though, and the 2 words you like: term limits. For what you're saying to work, you have to put that into place in both the House and the Senate in some fashion, because you will always create too much of a high volume incentive for someone to win on a Tuesday in November and not do the right thing.
As long as you have professional politicians, you'll never have term limits.
Yeah.
Because a professional politician can't put a term limit in place because it terminates their career. So how are we going to get there? You and I have to vote fucking people into office who will get there and vote for term limits, right? That's, as much as people want to hate Donald Trump is the closest thing to how our presidential policy or process was supposed to work that since like the forefathers themselves.
What? Why?
Because he's not a professional politician. He is a business person who is stepping out of business to sacrifice 4 years of his life in office, because or 8 years of his life in office, and then he's supposed to leave and go back to contributing to business. That's how our country was built. That's what the forefathers wanted. They wanted successful business people, successful entrepreneurs, successful executives, successful doctors and attorneys and everything else. They wanted them to be successful in their career, run for office, win the election based on the people, represent the people's needs for a term limit, and then step out of office and go right back into their job, right? Yeah. What did George Washington do?
Yes, exactly.
That's how it was supposed to work. We fucked that system up, dude, and we became driven by professional politics. We became expert marketers and calling ourselves campaigners instead. So we, the American people, have to take some freaking ownership of how fucked up our government is. Because when we don't pay attention, when we don't vote, when we don't get off our ass to go to every electoral, registration or every poll, we're just entrenching the current process more and more.
How often do you and your CIA colleagues, like during your career, how often when you're in the middle of missions or whatever, wherever the fuck, would you guys talk politics?
We don't talk a lot about politics, frankly, because the issues that are happening around us, like the actual operation itself, demands most of our mental energy. But what we do talk about is how fucked up the nature of operations is, because it's not based on priorities that are operational.
What do you mean by that?
It's based on political priorities.
Priorities that are operational.
So Think of
I got it.
yeah, think of an operation as like a project in a
Yeah.
business, right? So your boss, you work in a cereal factory and they want to create a new flavor of cereal. In order for that new flavor of cereal to be approved and created, you have to have a budget committee that meets, you have to have a marketing committee that meets, you have to have the boss has to give 3 different bosses have to say yes. And then only after everybody says yes, some pile of money is then dedicated to the project. And then only after the pile of money is dedicated to the project can you go about buying the machine, buying the ingredients, and creating the cereal, right? There's a process to it. Same way with secret agent operations or military or clandestine operations. Somebody has to propose it. Somebody else has to sketch it out. Somebody else has to approve it. 3 different levels of leadership have to say yes. Then a bucket of money comes over. And that bucket of money is usually 50% of what you actually asked for because they want proof of concept before they give you more money.
Yeah.
So it's just, that's the machine. So what ends up happening is when you're the ass on the line, you're like, we're supposed to do this big thing. We're supposed to collect secrets about hypersonic missile development in Iran. That's what we're supposed to do. We asked for $15 million. They gave us $5 million. And they told us that in 365 days, we have to demonstrate XYZ progress in order to get the next installment of $5 million. So now we're trying to launch an operation that's underfunded to fulfill a priority that the current policymakers said is a $15 million priority. Well, guess what's going to happen over the next year? There's going to be half the states are going to have new senators. There's going to be or new Congress people, right? Things are going to change. So then you might be 6 months into your 1-year op, 6 months into the first year of a 5-year op, and then new policymakers step in and Russia invades Ukraine. And then the policymakers are like, we don't care about hypersonic missiles in Iran right now. What we care about is intelligence on the battlefield in Ukraine.
And they really have that much power to say we know where you're spending every single dollar? Because a lot of people at home wonder if that's really the case.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. Because there's so much oversight. Like, dude, when you meet with an asset in the field, if you're an informant in the field and I'm your handler and we meet and I slide you $50 and I'm like, thank you for your information. Here's $50. Do you know what I have to slide you next? A fucking piece of paper for you to sign as a receipt. I shit you not. I shit you not. And then on that receipt in English, it has to say $50, my name, and then you have to sign it with something identifiable to you as the asset. So it can be an X or a Y or an
every
L.
time.
Every time. Because then I have to take that receipt back, and guess who I give it to?
Uncle Sam.
A budget and finance person who has to take my receipt along with all the other receipts from all the other field officers who had a meeting that day. And he has to run it against a budget that says, I gave $250 to field officers today, and I got $250 in receipts. And I can now put this $250 under a line item that says paying informants or paying assets, right? Field, slush fund, whatever it is. The same thing has to happen with every piece of equipment that comes in and out. If I want to put a GPS tracker on your boat, I have to request that GPS tracker. Always.
Shout out to Linda at CIA doing God's work out there. Jesus Christ. I don't want that job.
So that's why if we often talk, and I've said this to you before, right? There's only 10% of CIA that works undercover, roughly. And then of the people that work undercover, it's only about another 10% that operate in the field undercover.
Yeah.
That means the other 97% of the population of CIA is there to support those undercover operations financially, administratively, analytically, logistically, right? We have our own cartographers that make maps. We have our own librarians that look shit up. We have our own tech people who create ways for us to have, covert cell phone communication. All those personnel, all that talent, all that money is there to support a few field operations. Not because those field operations are super dangerous, some of them are, but because it's a fucking administrative burden.
Yeah.
To be able to communicate back to the Congress who approves the funding, like, hey, you gave us $5 million, we spent that $5 million responsibly.
You've heard different guys, though, from those seats, like, vaguely say things, not even vaguely. Like, I'm thinking of one right now, Chuck Schumer, longtime senator, career politician, powerful guy in D.C. he said things on TV talking about like, you don't want to make enemies with the intelligence community, and the implication there is they got a lot more power than I do. So it almost surprises me that things like this would be like the intelligence community during serious operations would actually care that much about following every letter of law because they got to report it to Senate. It's almost like, can't they report whatever they want to Senate?
Absolutely. And that's the reality. That's where the rubber meets the road, right? In some parts of the world, if you're in Africa, you might pay somebody with $250 and get a receipt. If you're in more important places like Russia, you're probably not paying somebody $250. You're probably paying them like $25,000.
Nice bricks of cash.
Right? Big chunks of cash.
Big chunk.
So that means all the same process applies. I'm going and getting approval to bake a little football that carries $100,000 in cash. If you've never seen $100,000 in cash, it's not very big.
Yeah.
Right? We get that thing wrapped up in non-sequential bills. Maybe we even have it converted into local currency. So we're doing it in Armenia. So it's an Armenian currency. Who knows what? We wrap it up. We take it to the meeting. We hand it off. We get our receipts. That's $25,000 or $200,000 or $100,000, whatever it is, $100,000 that has now been transferred. We don't know what the fuck it's being spent on.
Apparently not.
So imagine 10 meetings like that.
Yeah.
Now you have $1 million that have just been exchanged. You come back to the Senate House and you're like, we spent $1 million on intelligence against Russia. And they're like, well, where did that $1 million go? And you're
Don't
like,
worry about it. Don't fucking worry about it. You understand?
Even worse, we'll be like, we spent $1 million on getting secrets from Russian assets. And they're like, but you still didn't know when they were going to invade Ukraine? And you're like, well, if you would have given us $2 million, we could have done that too. And that's the back and forth, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of money that gets lost. Just think about what happened with the Mujahideen that then turned into the Taliban.
In the 80s? Yeah.
We were giving them money. We were giving them shoulder-carried rockets. We were giving them ammunition. We were giving them training.
How'd that work out?
All that stuff came back as receipts, but then you saw how it all worked out.
We got some receipts a mile away.
Bingo.
Jesus Christ. I mean, the 500-pound elephant in the room there is, though, does China have to get receipts when their intelligence agents are doing this shit?
Nope.
Russia?
Nope.
Iran?
They're not democracies.
Yeah, I'm not going to go through every country, but again, like...
The oversight is completely different. We have...
Sometimes I want it both ways.
I totally agree. And unfortunately, man, the 1,000-pound elephant to your 500-pound elephant is that every American is sitting in their fucking lazy boy, sitting at their desk, sitting on the shitter, asking themselves the same question.
Yeah.
I kind of want it both ways. What do we mean? We kind of want to be a democracy, but get the chance to skip the democratic process every now and then.
Right.
If we, as the world's superpower, if we're asking ourselves that question right now, what is every developing nation also asking themselves right now? Do we want to be a democracy, or do we want to be authoritarian? And that is the real reason that we're seeing such a rise in power and popularity for leaders like Xi Jinping, leaders like Vladimir Putin, leaders like Netanyahu, leaders like the Ayatollah in Iran. Iran just had an election. They just elected a new president who's a reformist.
Is that a real election?
Yeah, I think it's a real election. I mean, the fact that he won, I remember when he was running, I sat there with my wife, who's former CIA, and both of us were like, if that dude wins in Iran, like that's going to really upset the apple cart, because we've been saying for a long time that Iran is not a democracy. Even though Iran does practice democratic principles, the narrative that has been adopted in the United States from all the messaging that you hear about Iran is that it's like a extremist haven for terrorists and authoritarian rule under the Ayatollah. Well, they just showed that people turn out, people vote, and then they respect the vote. They honor the vote of the people. A very small group of people, and again, the Ayatollah knew that the people voting were a small group of people and they were going to vote for this reformist. Yes. So he tried to get more of the fundamentalists out to vote against the reformist. It just didn't work. because they don't, the Iranian people themselves don't believe in their own democratic process. Nevertheless, what we have seen is that because there's a new reformist president in Iran, we lose the chance to say that Iran is not a democracy anymore because they just had a democratic vote. They voted in an opposition leader, and that opposition leader is now working hand in hand with the Ayatollah. Does that mean that the Ayatollah has any less power? No, but it does challenge the messaging and the narrative that has existed about Iran.
That's wild that we could sit here and say, like, oh, they're a little democratic over there.
Isn't that fucking crazy?
You know what? They love democracy.
They love democracy. They do. They just love their Ayatollah more.
Oh, my God. God, that was such a fuck up, letting that happen in 79. Such a fuck up to let that happen. And now, we're fucking 55 years later. And you know what? The Shah's son, Pahlavi, have you followed him at all?
No.
Very interesting. So when that place falls in 79, the family gets refuge in the United States. So he lives here, raised his daughters here. I think his mom's here too. So the wife of the Shah of Iran. And there's conversation that when and if they were able to push out the regime in Iran, that he would return home and be installed as, I don't know if it would be a Shah, but as like the leader. Now, this is a guy who's lived in America for the last 55 years in D.C., hobnobbing with everyone down there. And it makes you wonder, like, if there is a regime change, I'm just being a realist here, wouldn't it make sense that all the countries who are most invested in seeing that happen, meaning like Western countries like the United States, maybe would want to plug in a guy who's one of their own like that?
Absolutely, but that's not new news. Like,
no, it's not.
Yeah, every country wants to influence an election to get a candidate that is going to see things their way.
But literally, someone who I don't want to use the term like on the payroll, but like, I mean, look where dude lives. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is.
Yeah, getting somebody on the payroll to also win the ticket is tough. That's also a lot of pre 9/11 CIA stuff. Trying to sway elections, trying to...
Pre 9/11?
Yeah, pre 9/11.
What about a little post 9/11?
Post 9/11, the oversight is significantly different, man. It's a different world of intelligence post 9/11. It's hard to explain, but when I started CIA in 2007, the people who were training me in field tradecraft were all people who had built their career pre 9/11, right? 10, 15, 20-year veterans teaching the newest class. They knew nothing about the war on terror. They knew about the Cold War. They knew about the world with no oversight. They knew about the world before you had to document everything. We were being trained in a new way where everything had to be documented and everything had to be approved and everything had oversight. So there was this discontinuity in the training where they would be teaching us something that they themselves only recently learned.
Yes.
And then their war stories would be war stories that we would never get to do because they were involved in like trying to poison Castro and have his beard fall out.
And you can't do that?
No, we can't do that now. Maybe with the right court approval you can. Mm-hmm. But I mean, now it's a different world now.
You're a good company, man. I'll give you that. You're good. You say that with a straight face. You're like, we would never do that. We never try to take out a world leader. That is beneath us.
Oh, it's
as an organization.
It's not beneath the organization. It's just administratively difficult.
Okay. All right. That's a better answer. I like that answer. It's administratively CIA killing other world leaders. Administratively difficult.
Administratively
I can
challenging.
accept that. See, that's why doesn't it feel better to be honest? You know
I've never been anything but honest with you, brother. So if the whole reason, like Snowden, and I love disagreeing with you on Snowden.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, we don't have to do it much. It's always nice to talk about a situation where you're wrong.
That was good. That was good. I didn't see that coming. Say that to John tomorrow.
Oh, dude, I can't.
Just like
I
that.
am so excited
I'm very excited. You are two of the smartest individuals I've listened to on podcasts before. You're both brilliant men. You come at it. We're talking about John Kiriakou, by the way. That podcast, I'm sure Danny Jones is doing it with you. It's going to be amazing. It's going to come out after this one. So everyone stay tuned for that on Danny Jones' podcast channel and go subscribe. But John Kiriakou is a former extremely high-level CIA guy who ended up going to prison for commenting on stuff. And there's a whole story there. And it's really fucked up what they did to him. But he likes some of the stuff that Snowden did, and there's a lot of disagreements you guys have. So that's going to be great. But I don't want to get you off track here. You're talking about your opinion on it. So
No, it's all good. Just the idea that, so let's just compare Snowden and Assange, right? Because Assange just recently got sent back to Australia. Espionage charges were lifted. Like, he's a free man.
Yes.
After fucking
a while.
12 years?
I don't know if it was that. It was a long time.
It was a long time between British prisons and
the embassy.
Yeah, the embassy in Ecuador. Yeah, right. So, and the argument for both is the same, even though the circumstances for both are totally different. Snowden was an American citizen. He was a contractor for a government contracting organization that was working for NSA. So, like Booz Allen Hamilton or Raytheon or somebody. So he wasn't a sworn officer, but prior to becoming a contractor, he was a sworn officer. So he's working for NSA on a commercial contract when he comes across this program that he believes is a violation of American rights.
It's called Heartbeat, I think.
I forget the name of the program.
Heartbeat for, we'll come up with it.
Right. But so to whistleblow, he takes the story to a foreign news source, The Guardian, which is a UK news source, and he breaks the story in a foreign news source and then flees to a series of countries that are not, that are American adversaries.
I want to step in for 1 second. And you're correct that he went to like Hong Kong, which, is under the veil of China. I'm with you there. The Russia thing, his plane got down there. Vice President Biden at the time diplomatically ordered his plane down in Russia. So that was not his plan.
Right. But before Hong Kong, he was in Ecuador. He was in Cuba. He was
in Cuba?
Maybe not Cuba. Can we track?
Yeah. Where
can we track all the places that Snowden essentially traveled in his escape from the United States?
After Hawaii, when he went from Hawaii to Hong Kong, did Snowden go anywhere in between?
I don't think he went straight to Hong Kong. I think Hong Kong.
I don't think you can you from there? Oh, you
I'm
probably
pretty sure.
could from
I'm
Hawaii.
pretty sure he spent years in South America. It was in like Uruguay or Ecuador. He was somewhere.
So he went.
There it is.
Edward Snowden's movements.
Invaded U.S. Go ahead and click on.
Well, no. So all right, you're not. I think you have it a little bit backwards.
Hawaii to Hong Kong.
Yes, your point remains. He was trying to go to Ecuador, and his plane was downed in Moscow, so he never got there. But he was going to a country that maybe has some diplomatic issues with America. Okay.
Correct. So the point is, he was an American citizen who exposed secrets that he had been sworn to keep, and he knew the purpose and intent of the intelligence agency because he was a sworn officer of the federal government before he was a contractor. That exposing whistleblowing national security secrets that are classified at a top secret level, knowingly, when you have been charged to protect those secrets, that is completely different than Julian Assange, who was the editor-in-chief of a website that was accepting secrets from all over the world.
Yes.
He himself being an Australian citizen. And then Chelsea Manning, who is a Army private or sergeant, something like that.
Sounds right.
Low-level Army person, gives those secrets to WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks publishes those secrets. And now somehow the United States tries to pursue Assange under the Espionage Act, just like they were pursuing Snowden under the Espionage Act. Completely different cases. Julian Assange, not an American citizen. Edward Snowden, American citizen. Julian Assange, never sworn to protect and keep a secret.
Journalist, yeah.
Right? Edward Snowden swore to protect and keep a secret. Contractually, Assange never said he would hide secrets. Contractually, Edward Snowden said he would. Right? Assange published on his own website. Snowden published on a foreign country's newspaper periodical, right? So these two people are completely different. Julian Assange, I am happy that he has gotten released and he's back home and he is doing what he has always tried to do, which is adding transparency to a world full of secrets.
Well.
Whether or not that's being shaped by foreign powers, what else isn't being shaped by foreign powers?
Yeah.
But Edward Snowden, who intentionally violated the trust that was put in him by the American people, by his company, by the government, by the NSA, and then in the process of doing so, undid all the work of hundreds of dedicated NSA architects, programmers, strategists. Like, he not only ruined careers, he also undermined the national security of the United States to highlight a program that had already been deemed legal by a court system that was cleared to get the details of that classified operation. The fact that another court disagreed and said that the previous proceedings were superseded and illegal, that's no different than a criminal court coming to a guilty verdict and then an appeal court coming to a different verdict. It just shows that our court system isn't consistent. It doesn't actually mean that Snowden was right. You see what I'm saying?
All right. So there's a lot there, and you make some really good points. I want to be really fair to that too. So first of all, I think it's big of you to say that about Assange, especially someone coming from your organization where, some of your colleagues kind of tried to whack that guy. So I respect that. But with Snowden, I also see where you're coming from because of the precedent it sets. So I've always looked at this, and if people have heard me say this on the podcast before, I'm sorry, but I got to reiterate this for people who haven't. I've always said he was stuck between a shit or a fart because he had two slippery slopes. Let's look at the slippery slope that you're focused on, which I think is an important one. You break your contract. You disclose information that you swore yourself to secrecy to take the job to do in the first place. And you set the precedent that someone else in any chain of command within intelligence who has access to information can now point to you when they leak something and say, but Snowden leaks, so why can't I? And so maybe, let's say what Snowden leaked was at 100 scale of seriousness, which I would say it was. The next person can be at 99.5. It's still bad, but you see, it can work. It's a slippery slope, works its way down, and eventually people are just leaking whatever the fuck they want. And that's a problem. And this is where, when I look at it from the government perspective, I understand that. I do have an understanding of that. The other slippery slope, though, is the lack of responsibility within the chain of command. Edward Snowden did try to do it the correct way, and it wasn't in like a week. He tried to do it over, I believe it was at least a 2-year period, may have been longer than that. Go to his chain of command and say, guys, we are violating the law. We are violating what has been told that we can do. We are violating the U.S. Constitution. Here is all the proof. Please do something about it. And they always told him to fuck off. And so he was now looking at it like, okay, I can break the chain of command and leak something that is violating the Constitution. I hear your point that like the technology and the processes behind this apply to a lot of other things too. That's a fair point. So they have to rebuild all that. That's a big problem. I agree with that. But he's like, I can do that and trust that like they're going to be able to be creative and rebuild that. Or I can let this keep happening and 10 years from now look up and it's way worse. And maybe you have, worst case scenario, Big Brother in America. And fuck if I know what I would do in that situation. I don't know if anyone does, but I think to have your stance is fair. You can have that opinion. And I may disagree with it a little bit because I may lean on this slippery slope more than you lean on this one. But I think any of us who talk about this situation, regardless of which side we fall on, we got to at least recognize that there was a red pill and a blue pill there. And it wasn't the easiest answer. You think you should answer one way. I think maybe you should answer the other. But can you agree that there was something there where there is something wrong happening and he was trying to fix that, even if you think he did it in the wrong way?
I don't believe in right and wrong. You already know that.
Well, yeah.
Right? So Snowden's opinion that what we were doing was wrong was not everyone's opinion, right? There were obviously a whole chain of command of leadership that approved the project. There was a whole confidential cleared court system that deemed it to be legal. And then there was millions, tens of millions of dollars that went into building the program. All of that thought they were doing the right thing. Edward Snowden thought we were doing the wrong thing. And let me be fair. There were many people working on that program who didn't agree with the program.
Correct.
Many who did not agree with the program. Snowden's 2 years of complaints, or however many years it was, it wasn't that people told him to fuck off. He raised his concern within the chain of command, and he just didn't like the answer that came back. Because the chain of command came back and said, hey, we ran it up the chain. It's approved. It's legal. We're doing it.
But it wasn't legal.
It was legal.
How was it legal?
Because the court approved it.
But
the cleared court approved it.
But they, and again, now I'm getting off the details because I haven't looked at it in a while, but if I remember correctly, they manipulated what they were actually doing to the FISA court or whatever, to make it look like they were doing it within the bounds of that regulation, but they were not. They were spying on unsuspecting United States citizens, not people who, like you were making the argument, hey, this might be a terrorist. Literally everybody.
It was blanket coverage.
Correct.
Blanket coverage that had a so it's like a police wiretap, right? When the police, when FBI, when local police, when city police, when they actually tap a line, they can't just listen to the line. They have to choose, like I think it's a 15 or 30-second segment that they can listen to. And only if during that segment something of relevancy happens, then they have a piece of evidence that it's admissible in court.
Yes.
So if there's a 5-minute conversation and they choose the wrong 30 seconds to listen, they don't have any proof. They don't get to keep everything, right? That's what blanket approval means. It means the court is allowing you to collect blanket so that you can create a case off of specific instances that are all defined and it's heavily regulated, right? That's the way it works. The fact that metadata was collected, which isn't even personal information, it's metadata.
Can you define that?
Yeah, so metadata is all of the additional information that's created on the digital side of a digital piece of communication.
All right, that was good Japanese. Let's do English.
So you watch a Netflix show, right? The fact that it's your account under your name with your credit card to your home address, and it's the title of the show, that is private information. The fact that it streamed at 2:00 to a zip code, that's your zip code, and was watched for 7 minutes before it was paused, that's all metadata. Nobody knows that Julian Dorey watched fucking Coco for 7 minutes and then took a shit break. Nobody knows that.
Okay.
What they know is that this zip code streamed 7 minutes of this data from Netflix at this time. That's the difference between, and then there's all sorts of other metadata too, right? Which internet service provider carried the actual streaming service, what the bandwidth was, blah, 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 right? All of that's metadata, not personal information. Your cellular phone carries tons of metadata too. It's not just Julian Dorey called Danny Jones on August 1st and had an 11-minute conversation about Diet Coke.
Right.
That's personal data. That's encrypted for the most part. But the fact that Sprint supported a call to Verizon for 7 minutes from these two geographic, longitude directions, that's metadata. So the court system said collecting metadata in bulk with an effort to correlate that metadata with known terrorist activity is legal. And then a different court, a civil court, which is not a cleared court, determined later on that the cleared court made the wrong call. Well, guess what happens all the time in an appeal process? One court comes to one decision, a different court comes to a different decision. Different juries, different judges, different districts, different precincts.
That's true.
So does that mean that the person who's found guilty in the first court, but then innocent in the second court, is still guilty? Does that mean that they did the wrong thing if the appeal court found them not guilty?
I see what you're saying.
That's exactly what happened here, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, NSA still had to change their program because the court system did what the court system did. And they were two different court systems. Cleared courts have more access to more information. Civilian courts have less access to cleared information.
Yeah.
It's not really truly apples to apples.
Look, you make the argument in a very diplomatic way. I can't argue that. I think we've made the points on that. I really want to hear you and John go at that. John's a way better person to discuss that with you than me for obvious reasons. So
real quick, because I just
Yeah.
want to fact check this, Leslie. John Kiriakou has his own podcast, yeah? I'm pretty sure he does.
Does he?
And I'm pretty sure it's sponsored by Russian state media.
Oh God! All right, that's a whole nother conversation. I
Just
knew
wanna-
you were going
Just
there.
want to fact check it because
Just all right. We'll fact check it real
I
quick.
want that to break on your show because I'm going to be talking about that.
I want you to discuss that with him on that podcast for sure, because he's talked about that before and what happened there and everything. I don't know. He has been. I will say this: whether or not this is true, what you said, he has been on those networks and has been paid by those networks. That's not wrong. But hear him out on that.
That's not wrong, meaning that's not inaccurate.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you are accurate. But I want you to talk about that with him real quick. I just have to go to the bathroom. We're gonna come back. We gotta talk about UFOs. We gotta talk about Diddy. We got a lot more on the bone here. So everyone just hold on 1 minute. Right back. All right, we're back. So you have been the star of a series on History Channel that we've talked about, Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. And I know we got into that on episode 150 based on the first season and what you were doing and some of your surprise there. But I've always enjoyed your thoughts on the UFO phenomenon because I think you're a realist about it. You're more data driven. You've expressed that you believe there's almost a statistical impossibility that there is not intelligent life out there. It's just a question of, are the things we're seeing reported as intelligent life here actually what they're reported as, which I think is really fair, because there's also been a lot of speculation, righteously so, I think, by a lot of people, that the things we're seeing are products of super advanced intelligence-related technology, not always necessarily our own, but yeah, certainly DARPA or CIA at the front end of that. So, having done season 1, what do you want? Are you working on season 3?
Season 2 is already live, and I think is aired.
Yep.
And season 3 scheduled.
Okay, so number 1, has your opinion changed or moved at all on that? And number 2, what are you guys going to be focused on and looking forward to in season 3?
So, I really appreciate where you're going with this, and I also really appreciate that you are so accurate and specific in the words that you use to describe my relationship with the phenomenon. Because what I have seen personally is that there is some strange shit that happens that doesn't have explanation. It doesn't have explanation in like normal civilian terms. It doesn't have it defies explanation in known science and known scientific terms. Equipment gives results that don't make sense according to how the equipment is supposed to work. I mean, and then of course on top of that, there's a whole world of secrets that we don't have access to. But even as we take this to my network of FBI, CIA, NSA, police, even as we expand and ask questions in my own personal network, the feedback that continuously comes back is that they are also stumped. So there really is something strange. There really is some kind of phenomenon that is consistent, is measurable, is witnessable, and is happening in our planet's atmosphere, right? And sometimes that phenomenon happens underground. Sometimes that phenomenon happens on the surface. Sometimes that phenomenon happens in the sky. Now, after being through 2 seasons of investigating high strangeness with the Skinwalker team and the Beyond Skinwalker effort, I am more convinced than ever that there is something happening. I am not any more convinced that it is alien in nature, but I am more and more confident that it does defy science as we understand science today, right? Energy signatures, transient physical evidence, like somehow you can see gaps in GPS data, gaps in geospatial data, gaps in energy returns. Like, it's the strangest thing, man. And nobody can explain it. Experts in their field can't explain it. Technical experts with the equipment can't explain it. Physicists, astrophysicists, like scientists can't explain it, but it happens and it's consistent, not everywhere, but in certain places. So why the hell is it that when I'm in a strange ranch in southern Colorado, I see the same weird shit that I see in the mountains of Nevada, but I don't see either of, like, those two things are consistent. But then when I go to someplace in Tennessee, we don't see shit. How does that happen? How is it, how is it that I can go one city over, I can go one national park or one state park over to where the terrain is exactly the same, granite rock to granite rock, but energy signatures are different, geospatial data is different, magnetic anomalies are different. How does that happen, right? And why does that happen? I don't think that it's alien. The proof that I'm seeing is not that it's alien, but the proof that I'm seeing is sure as hell that it is fucking weird. It's fascinating, and it shows the untapped advantages that a weapon system could get if it could figure out this science. And I gave you a lot right there. I don't know if it all made sense, because
No,
in my head, I'm reliving the investigation. And season 2 goes through a lot of that. And anybody who watches season 2 on History Channel or streams it Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, you're going to see exactly what I'm saying. There's so much strange shit that happens in our country that we don't even understand, that defies the laws of science as we understand them, the laws of physics as we understand them. And it stumps not just me as a CIA officer, but a whole range of experts that I've talked to.
Gun to your head, would you say it's super advanced, like DARPA technology?
I don't know if I would give DARPA the credit, but I would say that the 60-40 of what we're seeing is either advanced technology, or, this was really crazy, super old technology that we found a way to do better. Balloons, sea drones, unpowered passive devices, right? That kind of stuff.
What do you make of all the patterns, though, of people who have, around the world, who have claimed to have witnessed something? And again, you hear a lot of people now, they'll come up, they'll say, I'm an experiencer. And maybe somebody is, but the vast percentage of people is probably something different. But when you look at, say, the patterns that James Fox, who's been on the show, has created with the history of it since the 1940s, be it from China, Russia, United States, Australia, Africa, South America, all over the map, where they report the similar things. Small creatures, similar beady eyes, similar colors, craft described in often the same ways, a form of telepathy that happens for people that have encounters of the third kind. That's the right term, right, Alessi?
The fourth kind.
It's fourth kind, right? Where it's like everything all together. I guess there's a possibility. Well, there's certainly a possibility some people are lying. But when you see all these different people from so many different places who, before the internet, when these things are happening, had no ability to communicate with each other, what do you make of that?
So there's something very real there. There's two things that I've been able to actually see for myself and measure for myself. First, experiencers are having real experiences. From their point of view, with their 5 sensory organs, right? Their eyes, their nose, their ears, etc., they're having a very real experience. But all a sensory organ is a series of electrical patterns to the brain. So just like we can simulate, if you touch freezing cold water on a hot day, the first sensation you actually have when you stick your finger into the cold water is a burning sensation, because that's how the body interprets the sensation, right? Same thing happens if it's a freezing cold day and a lukewarm pool of water. As soon as you touch it, it feels super hot. That's just an electrical impulse. So it's not that what you see is really what you see, or what you hear is really what you hear. It's that your brain is interpreting electrical signals and translates those electrical signals into sensory perception. So what's wild to me is a lot of the experiencers that I've spoken to have had very real experiences, but that doesn't necessarily mean that what they experienced actually happened to them the way that they experienced it. They may have been touching cold water on a hot day, and what they experienced was burning. So that's what's so fascinating to me, because one of the things that we have absolutely been able to measure is that in areas where highly strange phenomena have happened, energy readings are all over the map. Electrical energy readings, magnetic energy readings, gravitational energy readings, all over the place. So we really could, for all intents and purposes, you could stand in one place and you don't smell anything and it feels like a 70-degree day. And then you stand 6 feet in a different place and now all of a sudden you smell oranges and it feels like a 90-degree day.
Mm.
Right? Like that's the impact of energy on your body and on your brain and how your brain interprets events. So when you think about true experiencers, if they're just temporarily co-located in an area where either a extraterrestrial phenomenon happened or a very terrestrial phenomenon happened with high energy readings, the experience could be the same. See what I'm saying?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I think that there's still a little bit of an open-ended argument as to the exact how many data points across how many years and how many places, like just statistically from like an anomaly perspective.
For sure.
How much that lines up. And it makes you think because, you know, people's heads go to, oh, are these different governments trying to put out misinformation, stuff like that? And that's a fair question to ask. But then you look at the people who are coming out and some of them smell government-y and other people don't, you know?
It can be both. That's what I'm saying. It can absolutely be both. It's not an either-or argument, right? It can be terrestrial and natural, and it can be government-related. Because what has the government always done? When it was like the 1920s, the government found where nature created forests, and then it started cutting down trees. It went to the place where nature created gold reserves and gold ore, and then it started mining operations. So why would we not think that if the government found a vortex of energy that could have benefit to aeronautical aviation technology or weapons technology or free energy, right?
Yep.
Whatever, fusion, fission, whatever.
Yep.
If they were to find one of those locations, wouldn't they go there? Wouldn't they also try to cover it up? Wouldn't it also be a place that has its own measurable differences against every place else? And wouldn't people in the surrounding area also have experiences that were related to the incredible amount of energy or the unique geology of that location?
Okay.
So I am more and more convinced that there's a terrestrial explanation for what most experiencers see. But here's the thing that's so interesting, especially if there's a terrestrial explanation for it, intelligent life from another planet would most likely identify those anomalies here when they did a scan of our planet. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
Yes. I agree.
Why would, I mean, if you were just, every time we fly in a plane, we do this. You fly over something. You fly over the flyover states. You look out your window. You see like rocks and desert. Not that interesting. But as soon as you fly over a city and you see the lights and you see the glow and you see the infrastructure of the roads, now it's more interesting. So you're flying over a wide patch of Earth and you're choosing what to focus on based off of something of interest in the landscape.
Yeah, I've always, and I love playing devil's advocate on everything around this topic because it is so unknown and there are so many possibilities here. And one of the things I've always brought up is I'm like, first of all, we can't put ourselves in the shoes of a highly advanced intelligent civilization who knows shit that we don't. That's number one. But if we could at least accept the fact that they just know a lot more and then use our imagination to say, so they could probably time travel or crazy shit like that. I've always wondered how they wouldn't have simulated all these things to happen if they're true, like these different sightings. Here's what I mean by that. People are like, oh, well, if they're happening all over the place, why everyone's got an iPhone? How come we're not catching it up close or something like that? And I'm saying maybe when you see, for example, the Zimbabwe incident in 1994, where this was in the middle of, you know, the brush out in Zimbabwe, specifically by an international school where there were a bunch of 6-year-old kids playing, and that's it. Maybe an intelligence advanced civilization would have simulated, ooh, we want this one to crash or land there or whatever, so these 6-year-olds can see it and we can play, you know, Sims with how that affects what they say to the rest of the world and how the world views the potential phenomenon as like a psychological experiment, if you will, as opposed to having the same craft land in the middle of fucking New York City where 7 million people see it all at once and they're like, oh my God, they're here. You understand what I'm saying? Like, isn't it possible that if they're so powerful to have all these possibilities, they don't necessarily crash? It's more like it could be planned out as a simulation.
I think it is. I think anything is possible. But one of the things that is also becoming increasingly clear to me in my Beyond Skinwalker investigation is that one of the major flaws that happens when we talk to experiencers, one of the major flaws that highlights to me that an experiencer is not as genuine is when they become hyper-focused on the fact that an alien life is interested in human life. Why do we think that an advanced civilization of aliens would give two shits about human beings?
You're making the Neil deGrasse Tyson argument.
Why? Why do we think that they would care about us? We're inferior because they're super advanced and civilized, right? We don't make up a large contingent of what the Earth is.
What do you mean by that?
Like human beings aren't as prevalent as, say, trees or water or oxygen or nitrogen.
We're way smarter and way more interesting.
Not to them. Why do we think we're interesting to them? What makes you think that you're more fucking interesting than a dolphin to an alien?
Well, let me ask you this.
Because we make cities?
If we were able to fly over...
Ants make cities.
If we were able to fly over a world back 6,000 years ago with pre-Babylon, pre-Egypt or whatever, and see these ancient civilizations, you don't think that our current society, if we had the ability to do that, would be interested in those people who are, in most degrees, completely not advanced to us?
I think that there might be an interest, but does that mean that's what you went for?
What do you mean?
If we created time travel, this is a great mental experiment.
Yeah.
If we created time travel so that we today could go back in time to the past, if we spent the hundreds of trillions of dollars to invent that technology, do you think we would spend our time researching people? Or do you think we would spend our time and money mining resources or planting seeds that we would then cultivate, in the future? We would find some way to make something much more valuable than fucking watching people.
But that's...
Anthropology and tracking people, look, biology is one of the least funded sciences in the world right now. People just don't care about temporary living creatures.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.